Good afternoon, Eastern Washington and fellow Patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State, brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries and the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story. And the news behind the news is not about right or left, it's about right and wrong, about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ, and about not ending in prayer, but moving to action. It's also about the gospel of the kingdom. Zechariah 2:5, but I declares the Lord will be a wall of fire to her on all sides, and I will be the glory in her midst. I want to talk today about intentional evil. Many people think that there are forces at work in America that are just stupid, or maybe they just make mistakes, when in fact what we are facing in this country is intentional, planned evil. Jesus Christ came to save us from our sins. That was our choice to let in the enemy. It's important for us all to understand that there is a malevolent force, a force bent on our destruction, a force bent to steal, kill, and destroy, that we are facing every day. And the greatest lie of that enemy is that he doesn't exist. And probably the second greatest lie, at least inside the church, is that we can't do anything about it. When in fact, we're actually called to do something about it, and we've been given all authority over all the power of the enemy in Luke 10:19. So as Christians, the question is never, should we do something? The question should always be, Lord, what is your strategy, or how should we do something to change the world? Well, I want to get next to our guest today, who is in studio with us right now, because she is going to be talking exactly about intentional evil today, and about a plan that has been exposed, and more appropriately, I would call it a betrayal. Erin Cranzler, she's of Informed Choice Washington and Spokane Families for Freedom. Erin has been a medical freedom, a food freedom activist for over 15 years, and she is intent on building a community that will stand against tyranny. Informed Choice WA.org is the website. We'll put it up here very quickly. Erin, it's great to have you in studio today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about this event to start. Let's start the show with that, because we're going to end the show with that. What's happening on Saturday?
So we have an event called COVID Betrayal, A Path Forward. Our keynote speaker is going to be John Stockton. If you guys were paying attention during the mandates, John stood up against the mandates at Gonzaga and made a pretty big deal about that. He has since now become touting, he's opened up his own podcast called Voices for Medical Freedom, and he's touting children's health defense statistics, and he's opening up eyes that we haven't been able to get. So we're excited to have John Stockton coming, but we also have a bunch of medical professionals coming. We have about 7 doctors, some local, some national. I can get into those doctors if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I'd love you to, actually. I mean, I thought there was a consensus that everybody needed a vaccine. Is that not the case?
That is not the case.
So what doctors do you have coming?
We have Dr. Ryan Cole, who he stood up against the mandate. He's been persecuted during this also. He has one of the only independent pathology labs in the country, so he's getting real information that's not censored by money, by big pharma and things like that. And what he's finding in his lab, along with worldwide data that he's mixing that with, is the aggressive cancers that are happening after people have been vaccinated. Well, so, hearing from people like that who are actually, they're giving real information that they're finding in practice, not like Dr. Fauci, who hasn't touched a patient in ever. So we've brought on doctors who were actually witnessing what has happened to them. We have Dr. Renata Moon, who's here local. She's a pediatrician. She wants to bear witness to, the vaccine injury that she's witnessed, suppression of data, and restricted by protocols. When our family members went into the hospitals, or, for us, dealing with our parents or our loved ones, we were basically left to cater to them until they were basically on their deathbed, and then we could take them to the hospital. So, these protocols that were demanded in the hospitals were not what was best for patients. And that's also part of what we're going to be speaking to. We have Dr. Ammerling, who is going to be coming, and he's going to be speaking to kind of the loss of private practice. Most of our doctors are being strongholded by corporations. So the art of practicing medicine has been almost lost. And, doctors aren't being able to individually take care of their patients as they see fit because of the big corporation that has pretty much put a leash around everybody in the medical field. Also, Dr. Moon, I was going to say, she's was also a professor, and what she witnessed in the medical school profession and being bullied and being coerced within that. We also have Dr. Kinley, who's, I believe, kind of a local hero here. He, when I got COVID, he's the one I went to. I always thought, like, when I need, like, a real doctor, I'm going to go to Jason Kinley. And he has spoken for us at the health boards up in Olympia, and he's going to be speaking to the impacts of the vaccine and if you were forced into taking this vaccine, like, ways you can detox from this vaccine. So...
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I want to go back to Dr. Ryan Cole. Just saying his name, right? All of a sudden, social media, you don't have the same reach or whatever. It's just been interesting just watching that. And that we're not just talking about freedom of speech in the COVID realm. We're talking about it in many other realms, that freedom of speech has been censored all across the board.
Yeah, did you hear about what's happening in Ireland?
I have, and I want to get to that here in a second. Let's talk about the cancer coming next, this next kind of thing that is happening right now. I know many people have poo-pooed that idea, said, no, there's no way. But they said the same thing about deaths in regards to vaccinations as well. Mm-hmm. And there is very clearly statistical evidence that has not happened in the last 50 years, 100 years, and they can't really explain it. So talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk about what's going on in Ireland.
I'm sorry.
So it's okay. Let's talk a little bit about the cancer issue and the like, kind of what he's going to be talking about in that realm and the statistical increases that he is reporting.
Well, on what he's reporting, it's stuff that he's getting from his own lab. But we, speaking to what you're saying, we're getting this information from VAERS. The statistics have almost doubled in, the last 2 years from the last 50 years of reporting. So, the data is coming in. It's just taking time to get there. And then it's allowing people to make that correlation, because sometimes it doesn't happen immediately after you get the vaccine. People don't, replace that on the vaccine. So, as this grows, there's people that have been in remission that now all of a sudden have stage 4 again. And he's attributing that to the vaccine.
So who else is going to be here this weekend as part of the event?
We have Dr. Milhone, who he's been practicing for 20 years, and he is going to be talking to what the spike protein is doing and how he calls it heart toxic. So the spike protein is going into the heart and it's causing inflammation. So that's another thing that the vaccine is causing. It's not just one thing, it's many things: infertility, cancer, autoimmune disease. It's spiking everything in a lot of people, especially inflammation, which, then hurts everything in your body.
And actually, that's what kind of started me on my skepticism regarding vaccines, was personally witnessing in the military after a young 19-year-old man got an anthrax shot that suddenly he had pericarditis and he almost died. I mean, he was out for a while. That inflammation around the heart, that is a very interesting thing that is being investigated and also being observed right now. Who else is going to be here this weekend?
We have Dr. Palomiri, he's a local doctor here also. He's going to be giving his testimony of what happened to him being a professor at the university and how he was forced to quit. We have he's a PA, Scott Miller, who's here in the state, and he was treating patients with ivermectin and hydrochloroquine, and the state closed him down. Speaking to that, we're going to have 2 lawyer groups. One of them is Pete Serrano, who is the silent majority here. He stuck up for and has been representing Scott Miller and Dr. Ryan Cole in their cases against being persecuted. And he also just filed suit against Inslee about 3 weeks ago.
We're going to let people cheer on the other side of the radio right now at that last one.
Yeah, right. Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about what is your goal out of this? I mean, what do you want to have come out of this other than people getting information and being educated? What's the next step?
For me, and this whole thing is about, a path forward too. So what do? We've all been to rallies. We've all been to, all these things. But what happens once we leave those rallies? So we need to bring places for people to land, so bring all these groups that we have in Spokane, whether it's Liberty State or, different groups that we have here in Spokane, give them a landing place and build community. Come and network with other people, get involved in your community, because to me, I believe in strength in numbers, and also empower yourself with education, so you can go home and talk to your family members and your friends and be educated by professionals. So it's educating people, it's giving people a community, and ways for us to move forward. So a big part of this event is so that we don't forget what just happened to us in the last 3 years. This is something that we've never witnessed ever in our country or around the world. And we cannot forget what happened, and we cannot, because this is going to come around again. What's happening in Ireland, Biden just asked for $2 billion more for the next pandemic. So we are going to be facing lockdowns again. We're going to be facing mandates again, and we cannot comply. So again, building people around you, because when you have other people around you, you're just stronger. And then being educated so you can not give in and not comply.
Yeah, I mean, some of the elites seem gleeful at the idea of a next pandemic. It's just it's very disconcerting. Let's talk a little bit about Ireland now. It's a great segue. What is going on in Ireland that people need to know about?
Well, they're passing through I believe it's going to go to the Senate, but it's already passed their House. And it's a bill that makes it illegal, basically, to even look up information on your computer. They can basically come into your house, and if you've searched something that's on the fringe or misinformation, they can arrest you for that, just for looking up information.
I want to just talk about that very quickly. The founding, this isn't something new, okay? The British government under King George III was censoring the colonists and telling them, you can't talk about this. They called them, backwoods Bible thumpers. They called them all kinds of names. You can't do this. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And so they said, listen, we're going to write it in that Congress shall not, right? So in other words, the Bill of Rights applies to government. You shall not infringe on speech. And yet here we are again today. It's almost like they knew it might happen again. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about this. What have you seen just in the small Spokane area, right? I mean, what have you seen as far as censorship and being throttled and people just saying, that can't be possible and all this kind of, share a little bit about that, but also what you did to combat it.
I mean, just with this event, just sharing it on social media, I was flagged for hate speech. Right. I did fight it, and then they came back to me and said, okay, you didn't go against community standards, but I had to, ask them to please review that again. And our reach hasn't been out there. We've been noticing just with we've been paying for advertisements, and they're just not letting this event get out.
Right, which is why Patriot Radio is going to help that out right now. So everybody that is listening to this across all of Eastern Washington, North Idaho, Western Montana, and beyond, this Saturday, 1 o'clock, May 20th, Calvary Chapel, Spokane, up north, 511 Hastings. You should be there. If you've not heard about this, or maybe you're still a skeptic yourself, you're exactly who needs to come, and you're exactly who needs to get educated and get involved. Exactly. So, Erin, I want to kind of shift a little bit too to the VAERS just the system itself.
Oh,
right?
That's been completely censored.
Yeah.
Adding on to your last topic, that it was even throughout this whole pandemic. Like, I've been posting those numbers, and every time I would post those on Facebook, I would get flagged, and they would be put as misinformation. But then the website itself, Open VAERS, which was breaking it down into, VAERS is kind of a complicated website to go and search, but Open VAERS was making it very easy to read. He was putting in these red box numbers, and so it was very easy to share that information. But that was being censored almost as soon as you could put it up. Right,
and so this, so people understand what VAERS is. I mean, this is supposed to be an objective reporting system.
Yes, it's vaccine injury, and you're supposed to report to it. And the numbers that they used to have were like minuscule. And just since the start of the COVID vaccine, the chart has just gone off the chart.
And the whole point was, let's have a vaccine adverse event reporting system so we don't have a bunch of people injured. We can pull a vaccine if it's causing injury.
Well, back in 1986, when they passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, that took away all liability from pharmaceuticals, so that you can't sue to if you had a reaction. Then they made this reporting system. So it was kind of supposed to be a checks and balance, but they haven't they haven't been balancing that.
Right. And I just, years ago, we were in the legislature and we were fighting this issue. And I don't want to come across as I told you so. But the things that we were talking about back then, we were fighting then about mandatory vaccinations and all the things that they were trying to put in place. People were just like, that'll never happen. And yet here we are. They won't censor free speech. Yes, here we are. Mm-hmm. They won't try to target Christians. Yes, here we are. And we could go on and on about this. The things we talked about 5, 8 years ago are now here. So that brings up the point. You know, the most powerful force on the face of the planet are free people fighting in their own backyard for the freedom of themselves and their children. That's where it seems like we're at. What can people do locally to really not only educate, but what can people do locally to come together? You kind of started to talk about it a little bit, like a platform or a place that people can come together. Tell the listeners a little bit about what your vision is on that.
I mean, for me, it's coming to an event like this and just start talking to people, start networking people. Whether your passion is medical freedom, I have a group for medical freedom. If your passion is the Second Amendment rights, find a group for that. There's so many groups here in Spokane. We have a lot of active people here in this area. So, just try and root yourself in and meet other people and start talking, start getting involved because, we're not going to get away from this vaccine passport mandate that's still being headed. So, if we're pushed out of society because we're not going to take that vaccine, who grows our food? What doctors are willing to see us? Who's the resources within our community? How are we going to network within ourselves to withstand this box that they're creating for us?
We had one of the largest rallies in the history of Spokane, 5,000 people. You helped tremendously in getting that many people together. And I think it kind of shocked the powers that be in Spokane that there were that many people that were against this narrative that everybody had to be vaccinated and that COVID was this thing that was going to wipe out the planet.
That was a beautiful day for me. I mean, being an activist for as long as I've been and to see, people filling the street wide, marching, yelling, "No more vaccine." It brought tears to my eyes because I've been the lone person on a corner for so many years with a little paper sign. So,
well, that was what 3 years ago now.
Probably
so,
right.
Where do you put on the threshold of like 1 to 10? How awake are people now versus even back then?
I think we've had a big awakening. I think COVID. The lockdown had a lot of people at home looking on their computers and researching. So we had a huge medical force here in Spokane that we were helping get exemptions and help them not be persecuted in their work. So we had all those people come to our side of the table, and a lot of those people have woken up. So I think COVID kind of did a mark on them because a lot of people have woken up and been educated.
So I want to talk quickly about masks because it finally has been lifted, and all this has happened. All right, I want to talk about masks first. I studied personally in the military. One of my additional duties was a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare officer as one of my additional duties in the infantry and the cavalry. And I had an argument with somebody who had no experience at all trying to tell me that a mask would stop the virus. And I said, that is not, it's a mosquito going through a chain link fence.
Yeah.
How have you been approaching this issue? And what have you heard from people saying, I'm probably not going to do that again, or are they going to do that again?
I think there are some people who are going to comply again, but I think a lot of us who are realizing like the absurdity of wear a mask, don't wear a mask, wear 3 masks, wear 1 mask, like layer them up, don't layer them. Like there's been too much going back and forth that I think people are like scratching their heads going, maybe they don't know what they're doing. So I want to hope, and, me personally, I will never put a mask back on my child. And I, felt guilty over doing that. And again, I will never do that to him again.
Amen. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment 100%. So let's talk a little bit about the vaccine requirement for people coming into the United States. That has now finally ended.
Unless you're coming through the border, and then there's no requirement this whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we can talk about that on a different show, probably. Yeah, tens of thousands coming across the southern border is...
Well, I do think, because I have heard that like there are some still requirements from people coming from other countries, making them vaccinate before they come in. Because I'm trying to help a woman right now come in from Australia.
Yeah, and we had some from South America that want to come visit us on a mission. You know, they're on the mission field. We want to help them, and they wanted to come back, and they couldn't.
Yeah.
So what has made us now past the COVID pandemic that we... don't need those requirements anymore, or maybe we do, or what's coming next? I just kind of feel like...
we can't forget gain of function.
Okay, let's talk about it. Yeah.
Yes. We believe that this was a man-made virus, and gain of function played a part in that. And I believe that they'll do it again when they're already, asking for money to do it.
The United States just funded the same agency again. I mean, this is actually unbelievable. For people that don't know what gain of function means, could you describe what that is a little bit and how that may have played into this whole Wuhan Chinese
basically like
virus?
Taking a virus and then making it more stronger, more deadly, more contagious, making it more than what it originally was.
So modifying viruses, genetic modification to make it more deadly. Mm-hmm. And why would anybody ever do that?
Control.
Right. I mean, honestly, I understand some people have tried to make the argument that, well, we're making it so we can make a cure for it. Well, if it doesn't exist, why are you, unless you are actually owning the cure? Talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. They, like Fauci owning the patent for remdesivir, one of the antidote, or one of the protocols for COVID, so these people have ties within, money-making ties within what they're doing.
Yeah, and so this kind of brings us, we should ask questions about this, right? It's not wrong to ask questions. Okay, you're tied on both sides of this. That really kind of looks shady. Let's start asking questions. And yet, as soon as you start asking questions, that's exactly when you get censored.
Yeah. And if we believe in our own natural immune systems, our societies have gone through so many illnesses before. And if we had let COVID just run through our society, it would have come up and it would have already been on the downcline after 2 years. That's kind of a typical lasting of something like this.
Yeah, and again, not I told you so, but 2 weeks, okay?
Yeah.
This is 2 weeks after this came into the modern parlance and the modern discussion. Patriot Radio was on there saying, this looks like a man-made virus from the Chinese Communist Party, and very likely there may have been some U.S. research involved. Now, that was way back then. So you can't like, you could play like Monday morning quarterback maybe from last year, but all the way back at the start. And the question is, well, how did we know that? Erin, how did you know there was something up at the very beginning that didn't make sense? And then when they started pushing mandatory vaccinations, how'd you know something was up? And how can people be discerning in the future when something new, because it's not going to be exactly the same, when something new comes up, they can be discerning that, hey, yeah, something's wrong here.
So I like to follow scientists and doctors. That's kind of my thing. And I followed James Lyons Weiler. And from the very beginning, from day one, he was saying that he found something within the vaccine that was man-made that could not have naturally been in there. So from day one, I've been touting that because of him. But we have now since learned more stuff. So that's how I got there, was following and paying attention to scientists in this field like Dr. Ryan Cole.
All right, so who should people then be watching and following to get real information that's accurate? Because you also got some people out there that use a lot of hyperbole and they're kind of hyping stuff up. Where can people go to get accurate information and know what's going on and see primary sources?
Like Informed Choice Washington, there's a lot of them out there, but there's also ones you have to be careful of. There's like the Health Ranger, but he's also a little bit
edgy. I got it. Yeah.
Yes. I like to follow individuals like Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Ryan Cole, Dr. Buttar, a lot of these people that have just been speaking out and speaking truth, even though that they've been censored. I kind of go after the ones that are being censored.
Yeah, and they've been right all along. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's got to count for something. So if people want to come to the event this Saturday, what do they need to do? Do they need to register? Where do they need to go?
You can go to Informed Choice Washington and go to the events, but you can also just show up at the door. It's $10 to get in. Wow,
$10. I love it. And John Stockton's going to be there.
And he's going to be there.
Can you talk a little bit about what his change was? What changed him? Does he, yeah.
I thought that he came to this newly, but I guess he's already been pretty much a health advocate. So I think this mandate really pushed him to start speaking out against it, but he has gotten a huge backlash for doing that. But I think, he's one that wants to stand on the right side and is not going to comply when he's being told to wear a mask when he believes that it's not, saving us. So, he's just been, he's a big force here in locally because Gonzaga, and a lot of people follow him and look up to him. So I'm hoping that he's going to bring, because, kind of in this world that we're in, we're kind of in an echo chamber, so we kind of reach the same people, but we really need to get out of that. And I'm hoping that John can do that.
Yeah, I think he actually is. I'm starting to hear a lot of buzz outside the normal circles, which is always the good indicator. Mm-hmm. So last, Spokane Families For Freedom, you help organize and help people to become resilient. Tell the listeners and everybody watching a little bit about that.
Yes, so I started, just really wanting to build community and bring people together. I started off mainly dealing with mothers and children because I wanted to bring education to mothers and children so that they would feel confident in their choices to not vaccinate their children. And so I started meeting in the local library and then outgrowing that. And then I opened the door more up for families because that's really what this is about. And I just believe, bringing people together, just what I've been saying this whole time, building community, being stronger together, and being educated. To me, that's a huge part of this. I don't get bullied, really, because people can understand that I'm staunch in my stance because I've been educated, not because I'm willy-nilly in it. I totally full-heartedly believe what I believe, and it's because I spend most of my time researching. And so I want to bring that to others and empower people to feel strong in their choices.
Erin, last, go ahead and plug one more time. Where can people go to find out more information about what we've been talking about today?
Yes, so it's going to be Informed Choice Washington, May 20th, this Saturday at Calvary Northside Church, 511 West Hastings, Calvary Church. The doors open at noon. We're going to have over 20 vendors there, so please come early and check out our vendors and be in your seat by 1 because this is going to be an action-packed event that we have every minute covered by an amazing speaker, so please be there.
Erin Cranzler, thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. Informed Choice Washington and Spokane Families For Freedom. You're doing a fantastic job. Everybody that has seen you over the years is so proud of you because you have made a gigantic impact in this community. God bless you and keep up the fight.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Informed Choice WA, WA.org, informedchoicewa.org. Again, this Saturday, you can get there at noon. That's when the doors open. 20 vendors are there. You can show up early and check it out. And it's going to be from the formal program from 1 to 5. John Stockton, Dr. Ryan Cole going to be there, among many other great guest speakers. If you have never heard of this, or maybe you're doubting, maybe you're on the fence, maybe you're on the edge, show up, get educated. Hear the other side of the story, or the rest of the story, as I would like to put it, because in many cases, here in the United States of America, we have been lied to, we have been manipulated, and they're attempting to control us. People are waking up around the country, and not just on this issue, but many other issues as well. And it's time to come together at the local level, put differences aside, and save this republic for the next generation. That brings me now to your daily intelligence briefing on the international front, coming to us from Twitter. First of all, this is fascinating, and I'm going to read this report, and then I'm going to give you kind of the rest of the story here. News outlet Walla reports that several U.S. and Israeli officials have said that the U.S. approached Israel about joint military planning regarding Iran over the last few weeks. Now, that sounds like a joint military operation. Well, later, from open source intelligence, it says this: Israel asked for clarification on the offer and is concerned that the American involvement could potentially hamper any action Israel wishes to take against Iran. Well, that's interesting. So they don't trust the Biden administration. But what's even more interesting than that, just before we came on the show today, KFIO, one of the premier Israeli counterintelligence websites, was offline. Typically, that only happens when the Israelis are about to do something. I'm not saying it's that in this case, but it certainly has my red flags up watching what's happening in the Middle East. Also today, from open source intelligence in Israel, tens of thousands of Israelis are marching through Jerusalem's Old City as part of the annual Flag March. The event is often seen violence, but this year it's actually been one of the more peaceful ones. And it is a parade that celebrates Israel's capture of Jerusalem following the 1967 war. Now, I just want to say this. It's fascinating that when certain people exercise free speech, like, marching or showing up at a Capitol, for example, that there was always an attempt to censor and disrupt that. We were just talking with Erin about the censoring of the vaccine adverse event reporting system. Why would you ever want to censor objective information unless you have an agenda? I mean, there really is no other reason. You can't really make a compelling case for any other reason. There is no personally identifiable information as part of this. This is talking about objective, and in fact, that was its stated purpose when it was made. So when we see these kind of things, remember to stay objective, and that takes me to the next thing, and that is Ukraine and Russia. Now, before I talk about this, there have been so many people that have been emailing me on this issue. I want to just say this. All right. If you are trained in warfare, you are trained to objectively look at a situation, take the politics out of it, take the emotions out of it. And what I'm seeing is a lot of Americans are emotionally invested in one side of the Ukrainian conflict or the other, instead of being objective and using normal intelligence analysis to look at these things. There are three levels of war: the moral, mental, and the physical level of war. When Russia invaded a sovereign country, it lost the moral level of war. And when it started using its normal strategy of artillery on civilian areas, it lost the moral level of the war. Now, we're seeing indications, and this coming to us from Asia Times, and if you can make sure that gets up there, Sora, the dissent among Putin's fighting troops. Prigozhin and Shoigu are in this, the defense minister of Russia, and then also the head of Wagner Group, are in this tit for tat on social media. Now, there have been some that have claimed that, well, this is just disinformation and they're trying to trick people. And actually, that's not bearing out right now. It is actually bearing out that this is an actual fight internal. Here's why I say this. Near Bakhmut, Prigozhin threatened to pull out his troops. And the reason for this, we now know from geolocated evidence. So I want to talk about what that means very quickly. Geolocated evidence is satellite evidence of the position of tanks and troops of either side. And Institute for the Study of War, for example, is doing a fantastic job tracking the war. So they know where the front lines are generally from day to day based on geolocation. Then there's geotagging, where you have geographic locations based on pictures. So, for example, many people who are tracking the battle damage or the amount of troops, the amount of armor, the amount of drones that have been destroyed, try to use geo-tagged pictures or video. So you can know how many vehicles have been destroyed or how many. You're not going to know perfectly, but it'll get you to a threshold. So when I say what I'm about to say, it's very clear that this happened based on geo-located evidence. They left, the Russians, very poorly trained troops at the flanks around Bakhmut. Wagner was in the center, at the heart of the battle. And as a result of that, the Ukrainians counterattacked the very weak and very under-equipped troops that had no anti-armor. And so what happened then is the Russians began to lose ground again. Here is why I'm bringing this up. Because as soon as you start seeing generals do this internally, you know that there are weaknesses internally. Now, this doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It happened back in the Revolutionary War between General George Washington and Charles Lee, for example, is cited in this article. But we need to understand that right now, based on this infighting that's happening, and based on the horrendously poor strategy from the Russian leadership, that the Russians are losing the mental level of the war. Now, the physical level of the war in many places is stalemated, but if you lose the moral level and the strategic level or the mental level of the war, you've lost the war. And so I want to just be objective here, that we can look at this and understand that Russia is being backed in a corner based on this objective analysis. But that actually is all, I believe, a massive distraction from our real adversary, who we are already at war with, and that is China. Which brings us, you can't make this stuff up, folks. You just can't. But China has lashed out at the United States, again from open source intelligence, lashed out against the United States and basically said it is prepared to crush Taiwan and its separatist movement there. Meanwhile, the United States has just signed 2 defense pacts with 2 island nations in the Pacific and is getting ready later this year to sign another one with the Marshall Islands. So you've got Micronesia, Palau, and then the Marshall Islands, which effectively gives the United States the ability to build bases further in the Pacific and to help build up allies. Now, here's the issue that I see. It's almost foregone that some kind of physical conflict is going to start here in the Pacific. The question is just when. And so the United States is scrambling to catch up. Would this have happened if Trump was president? Probably not. In fact, I would just say definitely not. There is going to be a huge push to rebuild the United States military. And I'm going to get to that here in a second, because virtually the entire general officership should be fired and they should go through a vetting process and be rehired. But that will wait for a minute. I'm going to go next to Ecuador. Now, here's why Ecuador is interesting, because based on the reporting from Michael Yon, and you can read about him on Twitter and online, he's been reporting from the Darien Gap and also from Claire Lopez. They are saying that the Chinese are flying people into Ecuador, and then they're coming up from there through Panama and Mexico, etc. Well, how would they have the money to fly into Ecuador, to drive? Where's the money coming from? Well, we've talked about it, the United States and the United Nations and other NGOs. Ecuador now, its embattled president, Guillermo Lasso, today dissolved the National Assembly and brought forward the presidential and legislative elections. Now, this is a constitutional move. It is in their constitution to be able to do this, but it allows him to rule essentially by decree until there are elections. Folks, I'm here to tell you there is a lot more going on behind the scenes than we could possibly even understand. And this, down in South America, is just part of it. Now, that brings me next. J. Michael Waller on Twitter. In charge of our nukes. Pay attention to this, folks. The Air Force has gone so woke that its leadership is unrecognizable. BIPOCs are favored for advancement to the top. This coming to us and to J. Michael Waller from danielgreenfield.org. Next chairman of the Joint Chiefs wants white male officers to be a minority. I thought we promoted people in the military based on skill, based on acumen, based on experience. This is extremely troubling. If this has infected the United States military, that means that a lot of the combat officers are not being promoted. The ones that are good are not being promoted. They're being left at the lower levels. And that is a national security issue. This kind of garbage has no place in the United States military, but it just shows us what is going to need to happen when Trump is reelected. Now, moving next to one of the most alarming, the oddest articles out there from KQED, quote, California officials investigating loss of 30-ton shipment of explosive chemicals. Oh, wait, not just any chemical, but 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate. 15 Ryder trucks, to put it into perspective. One Ryder truck was what was used in Oklahoma City. Oops, we just lost it. A rail car with 30 tons of the chemical left Cheyenne, Wyoming on April 12th. The car was found empty after it arrived 2 weeks later. How does that happen? And it's interesting, when it arrived 2 weeks later, it arrived at a rail stop in the Mojave Desert. So somewhere it stopped along the ways, it was completely unloaded. This stinks of a red flag, okay? That everybody should be paying attention to this right now, because a false flag seems like it might be in the making when 30 tons of ammonium nitrate go missing in the United States of America. Sir, I want to make sure that you post that up online underneath the show so people can actually link to that. Share this far and wide, folks. Educate your families on this. This is absolutely alarming. All right, next we're going to move to Gateway Pundit. A former FBI special agent left homeless after blowing the whistle on FBI and DOJ gives powerful testimony on abuses of power and weaponization. On Thursday, 3 former FBI officials testified during a public whistleblower hearing by the House Select Committee on the weaponization of the federal government. FBI Special Agent Garrett O'Boyle revealed in a shocking testimony that he and his family had their belongings confiscated by the FBI and were subsequently left homeless after he was suspended from the Bureau for speaking out against them. Well, this just goes to show that the FBI is beyond immediate repair and that it needs to be completely dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. There were many, many little excerpts out of this testimony. I just want to read one. Again, O'Boyle said this, quote, weaponization of the FBI and DOJ, stating that the organizations were weaponized against not only their own employees, but against those institutions and individuals that are supposed to protect the American people. In other words, they are literally violating their oath and fidelity, as was put out in the Durham report, to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and the American people. So if they're not doing that, what are they doing? How infiltrated is the FBI by the Muslim Brotherhood and other communist and Marxist-affiliated organizations? This is the question. And I think the answer would absolutely shock and appall most Americans. This is just the tip of the iceberg right here. And one of the reasons that President Trump needs to surround himself with people who are willing to completely dismantle these organizations and rebuild them according to the Constitution, with people who are faithful to the Constitution and our republic. That brings us to the next thing. This is from the Epoch Times. Leaked Pentagon report forensically dismantled Fauci-led natural origin study. So we knew this was going to happen. That eventually the evidence was going to prove true that this was a man-made virus, that it came from gain-of-function research. Researchers at the Department of Defense wrote a devastating takedown of the proximal origin study, which was used by Dr. Anthony Fauci as proof that COVID-19 virus had come from nature. Listen to this. The takedown report dated May 26, 2020. They censored this too. Was written in the form of a working paper called Critical Analysis of Anderson et al., the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. It was authored by Commander Jean-Paul Chrétien, a Navy doctor working at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Hear what I just said. This was a person working at DARPA and a research scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Dr. Robert Cutlip. The paper came to light on May 15th when it was leaked to the public. This stuff should never be leaked to the public. Should have been out front at the very beginning. Clearly, this is evidence they were trying to hide information that experts, people that literally it's their job to do this stuff, were calling out Fauci and the response to COVID. Now, the second part of this, Claire Lopez, a former CIA operations officer, and also just on Patriot Radio here just a couple weeks ago, is going to come on and talk about the biological weapons program in China. We're going to try to get her on here in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for that. That moves us next to a good news report. How many of you like to barbecue? Please tell me it's a lot. Please tell me you love barbecue ministry at your church, because it is really important. And we've been doing it now for thousands of years, okay? It is part of the Judeo-Christian ministry to barbecue meat. Red meat is not, okay, I want you to put this up in bold letters, Sawyer. Red meat is not a health threat. New study debunks years of junk research, quote unquote. Coming to us from Post Millennial and Katie Daviscourt, doing a fantastic job defending red meat and red-blooded Americans everywhere. I love it. All right, we're going to go next on Gateway Pundit to Maricopa County. This is fascinating. Listen to this. Now, this is the trial of the century in regards to election interference and election maneuvering. Maricopa County claims employee was removed after Kurt Olson plays bombshell video of signature reviewer verifying signatures in less than 2 seconds each. Employee seen working until the end of the signature review. So this is all part of this trial that's going on with Carrie Lake and verifying signatures. And here's why. Because if the signatures don't match, there are more than enough votes to overturn the results of that election in multiple races, actually. So keep your eyes on this. And again, that from Gateway Pundit. All right, last but not least, I want to talk again about the event this Saturday, the 20th, at Calvary Chapel, Spokane, up on the north side, 511 West Hastings Road. And also, there's going to be some fantastic vendors there as well. Now, the official event starts at 1 o'clock, but the doors open at 12, so get there at 12 o'clock. It's from 1 to 5. John Stockton is going to be speaking, Dr. Ryan Cole, among many other great guest speakers there. And if you want to get involved and just meet other people that are like-minded, because sometimes the media makes you think that you're isolated and alone, and it's just you, it's just the weird you. There's a lot of people out there that love evidence, that love science, and that understand that we've been lied to, and they're banding together all over the country, but they're banding together here in Spokane, Washington. Check out informedchoicewa.org, informedchoicewa.org for more information on that. Now, we want to talk about resilience. Now, I think it's a lot of us feel like we've been beating this drum for years. I mean, when I first came into the legislature, I brought up the 10th Amendment with huge movement with a bunch of us legislators from across the country, swept across the country. It was fantastic. We were fighting and saying, hey, listen, the Obama administration is doing some things that are undermining the fundamental foundations of this country, undermining rule of law, undermining the Constitution. We knew it was happening, and we knew it was going to be just bigger than a fight between conservatives and liberals. This is about right and wrong. This is about whether we want a republic to continue. And so as we had these debates over what are the values that have made this nation great, are we really a country that is of the people, by the people, and for the people? Are we really a republic, res publica, rule of law? Do we really believe that no matter who's in office, they can't vote away your rights? That's the difference between a republic and a democracy. We are not a democracy. We never have been. The word democracy isn't in any of the 50 state constitutions or any of the original founding documents. So you could go all the way back to the Virginia Charter, the Mayflower Compact, the Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies. You could go even to the Cape Henry Declaration. You will never find the word democracy. That's because the founding fathers understood that democracy soon waste, destroy, and kill themselves. Because a democracy is where 50.01% of the population can vote away the rights of the 49.99. In a republic, rule of law, you can't vote away the inalienable right, the unalienable. It can't be taken from you. A lien cannot be put on it. The unalienable right of free speech, freedom of religion, freedom and the right to bear arms, right to own property, the right to peaceably assemble for a redress and petition for a redress of grievances. And here's the thing about freedom of speech. You have to be okay when people say things that you disagree with. Now, if they're on your own personal social media page and they're harassing you, you have a right also to block them. That's part of free speech. And to say that you don't have that right to block somebody, that also is coming against free speech and the whole principle behind it. So it goes both ways. And the important thing in America is that with free speech, we can bring to the fore the best ideas, and we can bring to the fore, as we were talking about earlier, the truth about situations like COVID, and have an honest debate about it, and have all of the evidence put out there, not evidence that's censored or kind of ridiculous claims like mass stop viruses and things. We can actually have a honest, open debate about it and let people choose for themselves. What we're seeing under the current regime in America is they are trying to control the narrative. They're trying to control what you see, trying to control what you hear, trying to control what you have access to. And the only reason they would do that, especially if you're searching for the truth, is to keep you from it. So this is not a battle of Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal, libertarian versus libertine. This is a battle between good and evil. And evil always wants to force you to do their will. And that is what the World Economic Forum, among many other organizations out there, is all about. But here in America, we're a last bastion of freedom on a hill, the city on a hill, a light that cannot be stamped out. And that light should shine through every single one of us. So if you think tonight that you're not important, nope, you are important. You are supposed to be a light because the rest of the world is watching what we're going to do here in America. The rest of the world is watching to see if we have courage. The rest of the world is watching to see if we're going to stand. And Scripture is very clear that when evil comes, and in those evil times, we have one mission: stand. And stand on the foundation, the rock, Jesus Christ. Now, I want to give you an example of resiliency that is quite funny, actually. If you've heard me before talk about it, I talk about Wolverine leadership. Well, in this case, we're going to talk about raccoon leadership. Go ahead and roll the clip.
Now, this is the real news. You won't see this on the nightly news tonight.
Now, for those listening on the radio, we're watching a raccoon fall from several stories, land, and then run away. If you fall, you get back up again, all right? Doesn't matter what comes against you, you get back up again. Somebody throws you off the building, proverbially, tries to take your job, tries to threaten your family, tries to have you compromised, you get back up. You be that raccoon, you run. You run, and you go after the folks that are doing this. And there's so many ways to do it. Education's one way. Another way is just get them out of office. Elect them. Unelect them. Unelect them from office and elect good people in their stead. But I want to talk to you about Wolverine leadership tonight. Wolverines are fantastic. They run 3 miles an hour. Uphill, downhill, snow, sleet, mud, rain, wolverines run 3 miles an hour. In fact, they tracked a wolverine going up several thousand vertical feet up a mountain, and he was going 3 miles an hour. So wolverines teach us perseverance. We shouldn't just be in this for one event this Saturday or one rally. We should be in it for the long haul. Second thing that wolverines teach is that we need to have joy in the journey. Wolverines actually that have been raised from pups actually play fetch. They actually play fetch like a dog. They're really fun animals. I know that kind of shatters your picture of wolverines, but that means to us that we should take that opportunity to enjoy the journey and laugh along the way and have some fun. Because I got to tell you something, the liberals, they're not fun. Those guys Marxists aren't fun. They're always walking around with a scowl on their face because they just hate everything. They're not fun. We need to be fun. And our joy comes from the Lord. So if you don't have joy today, say, I receive your joy today, Lord Jesus, in your mighty name. Now, here's the other part that Wolverines teach us. They teach us also the Wolverine dad will spend exactly the same amount of time with each of the Wolverine pups. So tonight, spend some time with your family. Intentionally make time with your family. And the last thing that Wolverines teach us is this. If you try to attack a Wolverine's family, it will rip your face off. We need to defend our children. And I'm not talking about going and ripping anybody's face off. I'm talking about we need to stand between our children and those that seek to corrupt them, those that seek to turn them evil, those that seek to dumb them down, those that seek to ridicule them and throw them out. We need to stand in between evil and our kids and the next generation. And I hope that for you tonight motivates you to stand and fight. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.